Never too early to start, and the sooner you're aware of these things and start getting on them, then the better off you'll be. Hey, I hope you're doing well today. It's Amy, and today I'm going to be talking about how you can get into your dream school. So the first thing is to test your limits academic-wise. I got into Caltech, which is one of the hardest schools to get into in the US, and one of the hardest schools to get out of alive. In the beginning, I didn't really think that I wanted to get into Caltech. This wasn't my dream school, and it wasn't really on my radar per se, but I just knew that I wanted to do the best I could to see how far I could go. And so I just took the hardest classes in each of my grades that was offered. And even when I maxed out of my middle school classes, I would do classes that were only offered by the high schools. But I wouldn't have known that I could be at this level if I just decided that I was gonna cruise and just get an A in regular classes. This is especially important because it gets you in the mindset to always be pushing yourself to be above average, because in admissions it's so competitive. And so how are you gonna stand out? You do that as early as possible to show that you have a good work ethic and that you can reach a higher standard, and that's why those schools will want you. Why it's so good to start early is that, in middle school, you can set the foundation for a strong math background if you're interested in a STEM school. And then in high school, you have the awareness to start planning out your 4 years, because if, say, you start at a certain class, so I started in pre-calc in freshman year, if I didn't know that, then I would be set behind year after year, or I might have to skip a class, which is harder. Being able to know what's offered at your school and then really push yourself early on and before high school, when grades don't matter as much, then that's super valuable. But testing your limits academic-wise doesn't mean to do poorly in your classes. You still try to get your baseline. If you're a straight A student, just keep getting your straight A's. But in those higher classes, you might look better if you're in a harder class and you get a B than a class that's lower where you're just cruising and you get an A. So challenging yourself, even if you get a worse score than you would have, still looks better. Another thing is to have purposeful extracurriculars. You might think that you just want to load up your whole application and try as many things as possible. That's important and helpful to a certain extent. And then while you're doing it, kind of think why am I doing this math club? Why am I volunteering at the hospital? And if it's not really giving you value and you don't really have a passion and you're not taking on leadership roles or initiating and you're not having certain commitment to it, then maybe it's time to drop that and then have a more targeted mind to see what you're good at and what you like, such that then when you do well in those, it really reflects on your application. And it's a lot more genuine to the admissions to kind of understand the person you are, what your values and goals are, rather than just kind of a list that looks like you just try to stack it up. It's also really helpful to have these specialized extracurriculars.
Poetry club, a science Olympiad, or a creative writing club.
You see what you like more, and then maybe you'll have a better idea of what major you want to pick, and therefore which schools are more strong in that major. Better idea overall. I also helped my little sister get into Caltech, and that was her dream school, and she loves it there right now, by kind of following my footsteps and knowing the extracurriculars I did that are purposeful for that dream school, such as MATHCOUNTS, math club, and doing those competitions. Then she had a leg up and could just start that foundation a lot earlier. Building relationships with teachers can even mean just getting on their radar and building their awareness that you are a student in their class who has a certain name instead of all the students they teach, right? So then they can write a better letter of recommendation down the road. Greeting them every time you get in the door and asking them how their day was. Do this consistently, and also consistently ask questions. Asking questions is a very good habit to have overall. They see, this person's very active and engaged in class. They'll do great at this school, which is your dream school. Another thing to start early on is to network. I kind of hate the word networking because it just sounds so transactional per se. Talk to older students. You never know what you might learn from them that can inform your decision in terms of what activities to focus on, what paid off most for them, which classes you might think are a good idea to take, but maybe it doesn't pay off much down the road. Just by speaking more getting mentorship advice from people older than you is so valuable because yeah, they've gone through it too, and it's kind of like not learning things the hard way, right? They've learned it, which things to do, which things to avoid, especially if they're applying to colleges or they already have themselves. I was talking to my friend a year above me, and then she was talking about how she's in this online PE class, and I'm like,
what? Why can you say PE class online?
And she said that it was for a weighted GPA too. And I know this sounds kind of fake and that like I'm just trying to boost my GPA as much as possible, but this is just a good example of knowing something that other people wouldn't, just because it's a very kind of niche thing for an upperclassman to know and to pass down to their younger friends. In the end, who knows if this little bump in my GPA did anything, right? When you're gunning for your dream school, every little thing counts. You want to just stack those up, not like stacking up clubs, right? But like stack up any little advantage you may possibly have. Because if you think of it this way, like if you're equal with a candidate that they're looking at, but then you have this little thing, then that kind of is an easier decision for them if you have little boosts in all these different areas. Networking also means speaking with students of that dream school to demonstrate your interest. It gives you a leg up in terms of knowing and understanding what their culture is like, because then you can kind of direct what you're doing right now, if it's leadership activities and volunteer work, to be what that school would like, because schools kind of have a different culture here and there. You're also showing interest if you speak to that school's admissions officer, because I know sometimes if you set up like a meeting or like you reach out, they'll kind of point you to some resources. That's not something every student who wants to go to your same dream school would do. Give yourself an advantage and do that. While you look externally for information, also look internally. Find out what drives you and what motivated all the things that you do in your everyday life, or the things that you've chosen to do long term if you stayed committed to a certain activity like playing piano, doing a certain sport. By looking inward as early as possible and kind of noting things down that you see as patterns, it just makes it a lot easier to put together your essay and makes it a much more genuine and holistic, complete story of you. The application is just this very limited space for you to put who you are and all the accomplishments, values, and why they want you. It just seems like such a shot in the dark, and that you're throwing into the void just this tiny piece of who you are for this school that you really want to go to. Knowing your story and by formulating that into all the details of your application will make you stand out and potentially touch the person who is reading your application. You might be surprised is the last thing is to conduct research. Why do I put this last? So it's because after you kind of test your limits, know your story, choose your extracurriculars purposefully, then you have a better idea of what level you're at and where your stats lie and what you're interested in. And so this way you can better choose what is your dream school. Your dream school doesn't have to just be Stanford for everyone. It can just be somewhere where you think is just a very perfect fit, in multiple schools too. If you have a better idea of who you are, where your profile stands, then you know where your dream school can be. Your dream school can be known before you do all these things or at the end. Towards the end, you should know what you're gunning for, probably by junior year. Conducting research at this point, by knowing all the things you now know from what you did beforehand, will make it a lot more efficient. It'll narrow down what kinds of programs and offerings and support that the schools offer. Conducting research being last doesn't mean you do this after everything. By doing this throughout and attending any online info sessions, reading some guides on how to make your profile the most strong for certain schools, or going the opposite way of first looking at what your strengths are and then seeing the guide to help you inform what may be your dream school, a good process to go through. But yeah, overall, college isn't the end all be all. Through all of these efforts, they'll pay off in one way or another. You're increasing your own skills and human capital and getting to know yourself better. Don't think of it as too stressful that you must get into your dream school, and just do everything for the purpose of that. So do the things you enjoy, and then you'll enjoy where you end up, because that will then turn into your dream school. Make sure to comment if you have any questions, and even if you already know what your dream school is, share it below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, like and subscribe. Bye.